I'm a wildlife photographer. That's the only reason I bought a massive, isolated plot of land on the outskirts of a small town in Wyoming. Out here, the silence is usually your best friend. But in the spring of 2021, the silence turned into my worst enemy. We were going through a brutal month of rain. Every single day, the sky was a heavy, suffocating gray, turning the grasslands around my small cabin into a treacherous, muddy swamp. My nearest neighbor was 6 miles away. Out here, if something goes wrong, you're truly on your own. It was a Sunday around 7 p.m. I was sitting on my couch, trying to drown out the sound of the downpour with the TV, when I heard it. A faint, rhythmic knocking at my front door. When I opened it, my heart skipped a beat. Standing there was a man in his late 20s, soaked to the bone. He didn't have a jacket or a flashlight. He just stood there, staring. "Have you seen my dog?" he asked. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. "He went missing on your property." I looked past him into the darkness. I hadn't heard any barking or whistling. "I haven't seen any animals," I told him. I offered to call the forest rangers for him, but he just stared at me. Not at my face, but past me, into my house, as if he were memorizing the layout. "I'll find him myself," he whispered. Then, he turned and vanished into the black wall of trees. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. 2 hours later, well into the night, a flicker of light caught my eye. An orange glare was reflecting off the window in my backyard. I grabbed my camera's zoom lens and peered through the glass. My blood ran cold. About 50 yards away, under a massive pine tree, a small campfire was struggling against the rain. The stranger was sitting there. He was holding a piece of fabric over the flames, watching it burn. It was my favorite flannel shirt, the one I thought had blown off my laundry line a week ago. He wasn't looking at the fire. He was staring directly at my window. Even through the fog and rain, I knew he could see me. I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911. I knew the police would take at least an hour to reach this far out. While I was on the line with the operator, I heard a sound that made my skin crawl. Scritch, scritch. A metallic scratching sound coming from my front door lock. He wasn't knocking anymore. He was trying to pick the lock, quietly, professionally. When the door didn't budge, the quiet ended. He began slamming a heavy object against the wood, likely the stock of a rifle. He was muttering something under his breath, a low, distorted rambling that sounded like a prayer or a curse. He wasn't there to rob me. He was there for me. I grabbed my self-defense handgun from the hallway. I didn't want to kill anyone, but I couldn't wait any longer. I aimed at the top of the door frame and pulled the trigger. The deafening crack of the gunshot echoed through the small house. For a few seconds, my ears were ringing. When my hearing returned, all I heard was the rain. I waited 5 agonizing minutes before looking through the peephole. The porch was empty. In the mud outside, there were deep, frantic footprints leading away from my house. He had bolted the second I fired. When the police finally arrived, they found more than just a campfire. Buried deep between the roots of that old pine tree, they unearthed a plastic, waterproof bin. Inside were dozens of photographs. Photos of me cooking. Photos of me sleeping through the bedroom window. Photos of me working at my desk. They spanned back for months. Along with the photos, they found a kit of hunting knives and heavy-duty zip ties. The police told me this wasn't a random burglary. This was a stalk and replace scenario. He had been living in my woods, learning my life, waiting for the perfect storm to move in. They never caught him. I still live in the same house, but I've turned it into a fortress. New locks, cameras, and sensors. But on rainy nights, when the wind rattles the glass, I can't help but wonder, is he still out there in the dark, watching the windows, waiting for his next chance?
It was the spring of my final year in high school. We lived in an old wooden house that creaked with every step, in a quiet neighborhood so still you could hear footsteps on the street through closed windows. My mom worked late-night shifts as a nurse, which turned our home into my own private fortress from 8 in the evening until 4 in the morning. That night, I said goodbye to her at the door, the scent of her perfume mixed with hospital disinfectant lingering in the air. I closed the door behind her and sank into my own world. I played video games for hours, the screen the only light in the living room, while shadows swallowed the rest of the house. Around 11:30, exhaustion hit me. I turned off the console, climbed the creaking wooden stairs, and went to bed. I woke up suddenly, not from a nightmare, but from a soft thud downstairs. I looked at the digital clock by my bed, 3:30 a.m. I told myself, Mom must have come home early, trying to push away the growing fear. I lay on my back, waiting to hear her keys on the table or the kettle boiling. But instead, I heard footsteps. Heavy, slow, deliberate steps moving from the kitchen to the living room, pausing, then back toward the hallway. There was something wrong with the way they moved. This wasn't someone coming home from work, seeking rest. This was someone exploring. 3 minutes passed. My heart hammered like war drums. Why hadn't my mom come upstairs? Why was the house so dark? I got out of bed slowly, trying not to make a sound. I pressed the light switch in my room, and the footsteps stopped, as if the person downstairs had been waiting for that signal. Silence. I opened my door, crawled on my knees to the railing, peering into the darkness below. I saw nothing moved. The console still sat in place. But then I noticed it. Muddy footprints on the kitchen floor leading to the dining table. My gaze lifted slowly. In the shadowed corner of the kitchen sat a man. He wasn't searching drawers. He wasn't taking anything. He just sat. Straight-backed, hands neatly on the table. A dark cloth mask covered his face, his eyes shining through the holes, staring at me. He didn't move, didn't speak. The silence was what terrified me most. I ran upstairs, slammed my door, and called 911, trembling. There's someone in my kitchen. He's not doing anything, he's just staring. I heard the front door quietly open and close. Minutes later, the police arrived, then my mom. The officer told me something that kept me awake for weeks. The man hadn't stolen anything. Not my wallet, not the TV. But on the table, in front of the empty chair my mom always sat in at 4 a.m., lay a kitchen knife, placed there, carefully. He wasn't there to rob me. He knew my mom's schedule. He was waiting for her. I moved to a quiet suburb in Pennsylvania 2 years ago. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever happens. My neighbor, Mr. Graham, was a man in his late 70s, a retired cop. He spent most of his days on his front porch, watching the street through a pair of binoculars. At first, I felt safe. He told me the first day we met, "Don't worry, son. I've got eyes on your place 24/7. In this neighborhood, you gotta know who's coming and going." I thought he was just a lonely old man looking out for me. I was wrong. Then came the comments. I'd get home from work and he'd say, "Saw you left the kitchen light on until 3 a.m. last night. Sleep is important, Mark." I'd laugh it off as old man curiosity, but then things started shifting. I'd come home to find my bathroom window locked tight, even though I clearly remembered leaving it cracked for ventilation. Or the milk carton in the fridge would be moved to a different shelf. When I asked Graham if he saw anyone entering my house, he'd just stare at me with those cold, pale eyes and say, "No one gets past me, son. Maybe you're just stressed. Work can play tricks on your memory." One freezing winter night, I lost my keys. Before I could even call a locksmith, Graham appeared with a spare. He said the previous owner gave it to him for emergencies years ago. That was the final straw. The next morning, I replaced every lock in the house with smart fingerprint access bolts. I didn't give him a key. At 2 a.m. that night, my phone buzzed. A notification from my Ring camera. Failed login attempt. I opened the live feed. It was Graham. He was standing at my front door, trying to force his old key into my new lock. His face wasn't that of a sweet old man anymore. It was blank, expressionless. Then he leaned into the camera and whispered, so low it chilled my blood, "You ruined the game, Mark. You shouldn't have changed the locks." The police arrived, but Graham had retreated into his house. While they were clearing my place, an officer found something behind the heavy dresser in my bedroom. A small, jagged hole in the drywall, perfectly hidden from view. That hole led to a narrow crawl space, a dark, cramped void that connected my house directly to his. He wasn't just coming through the door, he was coming through the walls. Inside that space, they found a sleeping bag, a set of headphones connected to microphones hidden in my ceiling, and thousands of photos of me, sleeping, taken from that tiny hole over the course of a year. He wasn't watching the street, he was watching me. Graham was gone by the time they broke down his door. He had escaped through another tunnel he'd dug under his garden. The case is still open. And now, every time I hear a faint scratch or a creak behind the walls of my new home, I can't help but wonder, is he still protecting me? Or is he just waiting for me to fall asleep?